Have you ever wondered how Git works or what actually happens behind the scenes when you commit, push or branch your code? To know that, I built Trace. Trace is my attempt to build a version control system from scratch and wrapping it around a developer workflow, including a CLI, a GUI, a FastAPI backend, and a VS Code extension. The goal here was not to make another tool, but to learn how version control system works inside out. By the end, you will see the CLI, the GUI, and the architecture behind Trace. So let's jump in. Inside VS Code, Trace already feels like a native source control. I can see the commit history, I can see the state changes, I can see the unstate changes, and I can see all the branches that are created in this repository. And if I create a file here, let's say start.py, and let's add a statement print hello world. And inside Trace, you can already see that those changes are visible instantly. Trace also shows current changes down here in the status bar, so we have one unstate change. To state the change, just click on this add button and let's commit this change, initial commit. And just like that, we have created our first commit. So if I create any change in this file now, that change is instantly detected as modified. Now in commit history, if I click on the file snapshot in last commit, I can see what changes were made. We can see our semicolon over here. Now let's add this change to another branch. Branch options, create branch, dev, and just like that, branch is created. Check out to this branch, dev. It says you have unstate changes that will be overwritten. Because these changes were not committed, Trace warns us that if I check out to this branch, then these changes will be overwritten. Let's say yes, checkout. And now we are on dev branch. You can see the status of current branch by looking here. It says current branch. And let's add a new change over here. And let's commit this change on this branch. Now if I go back to main branch, we don't have that change over here. The change is present in dev branch, but not in main branch. To get that change in main branch, let's merge our branches. Click on merge branches and choose the source branch, and just like that, our branch is merged. If there are conflicting changes, then Trace will warn you before overwriting those changes. You can select if you want to overwrite those changes or if you want to resolve those commits manually. You can compare any change whenever you want from the commit history just by coming over here, expanding your required commit and choosing the file that you want to see changes, and you can see what changes were added and what were removed. If I right click in branches and choose rename a branch, select dev, and let's say I want to rename it to development. Rename. And just like that, our branch can be renamed to anything. If I want to delete a branch, as the development branch is already merged in main, let's choose delete branch and choose development and delete. And just like that, our branch is now deleted. This is the same workflow as every developer knows, but this is powered by my own backend. And I like this part because this shows the product working as a system, not just the code. Now the terminal side. Same agent, different face. If I run Trace, I can initialize a repository, I can stage files, I can create branches, I can commit my changes, and I can merge my branches. Basically everything you can do with VS Code extension, you can also do that with a CLI. Let's initialize the repository. And just like that, our repository is initialized. Let's create a file here. Start.py, print hello world. Stage this change. Add a nice commit message. And just like that, we have committed our first change through CLI. And we can also verify that by running trace log that shows complete commit history. If I run trace branch, I can see all of the available branches in this repository. Let's create a branch. Trace branch dev. Check out to dev. Let's add some changes on the dev. Let's add this change. commit it, verify. Let's go back to main. Our change is gone as expected. Let's get that change here. Trace merge from dev. And just like that, we have our change merged into the main branch. Basically, CLI offers everything that VS Code extension can do. You can also check out to any commit using the commit ID. Let's try that. Trace log to print the commit history. Trace checkout, and let's go to for our first commit. We are on our first commit, and let's check out back to main, and we have our commit restored. So trace works pretty well. Under the hood, trace is split into layers. VS Code extension and CLI layer are the topmost layers. CLI layer directly uses services layer functionality, and VS Code extension uses the FastAPI backend that exposes service layer functionalities. Services layer calls the core function of trace, and core functions call the storage layer of trace that actually writes and reads the data from the disk. That design keeps things clean. UI does not need to know how storage works, CLI does not need to know how extension works, but both use the same backend, and you can create your own interface on this backend. This setup is efficient for learning because it is simple, readable, and easy to debug. It is not pretending to be a production-based version control system, but it helps to know how mechanics of a version control system works. Trade-off is also clear. Full file snapshots are easier to implement, but also are not recommended for large-scale repositories. Of course, it uses some of optimizations. If there are no changes in a file, trace can reference same object instead of storing multiple snapshots of the same file.